Walk into almost any medieval torture museum in Europe, and you'll see the same spiked chair, the same Iron Maiden, the same rack. Here's what the plaque usually won't tell you. Most of these objects were never used to torture anyone. Some weren't even built in the Middle Ages. You've probably seen the Iron Maiden, that spiked coffin-shaped cabinet, in a museum, a movie, or a heavy metal album cover. It's one of the most recognizable symbols of medieval cruelty, but historians who've traced its origin found something the museums rarely mention. There's no credible medieval record of it being used. The earliest confirmed examples date from the 1700s or later, likely built as sideshow curiosities or even outright hoaxes, then relabeled as medieval to make them more shocking for paying visitors. This isn't a one-off. It turns out a huge share of what we picture as medieval torture wasn't medieval at all. It was invented centuries later, and it worked so well as entertainment that the myth simply never stopped spreading. So where did all these gruesome objects actually come from? Mostly the 18th and 19th centuries. As Europe industrialized, a market emerged for shock and spectacle, and traveling exhibitions needed props. Blacksmiths built elaborate medieval devices from scratch, aged the metal to look ancient, and sold the whole story along with the object. Museums, some genuinely fooled and some knowingly complicit, displayed them as historical artifacts because visitors wanted to see something horrifying, not a small, boring reality. Even devices that did exist, like thumbscrews, were real, but far less common and far more regulated than popular imagination suggests. The gap between the museum plaque and the historical record is often centuries wide. Here's what most people don't expect. Actual medieval torture, where it did occur, was heavily bureaucratic. In many European legal systems, judicial torture required documented justification, official witnesses, and strict limits on duration and method, on paper at least. It was typically reserved for serious crimes like treason or heresy, and used specifically to extract a confession, needed to secure a conviction under the legal standards of the time, not as random cruelty. Most day-to-day medieval punishment looked nothing like a dungeon scene. It looked like fines, public humiliation in stocks, banishment, or straightforward execution, usually by hanging, which was faster and cheaper than any elaborate device. That said, some devices genuinely existed and were genuinely brutal. The rack, used to stretch joints during interrogation, has solid documentation across multiple European legal systems. Thumbscrews, which crushed fingers under a tightening screw, were compact, portable, and well documented in court records. Public punishment devices like stocks and pillories were extremely common, not for torture in the modern sense, but for public humiliation, a punishment that relied on social shame rather than physical device. So why does the exaggerated version persist, even among historians who know better? Because the myth is more useful than the truth. Tourist museums profit from shock value. A display case of fines and paperwork doesn't sell tickets the way a spiked iron cabinet does. The Victorian era, obsessed with contrasting its own progress against a supposedly barbaric past, actively promoted the image of a savage. Middle Ages to make their own century look enlightened by comparison. Here's the twist that actually is disturbing, just not in the way you'd expect. The real danger of medieval justice wasn't exotic devices. It was how easily the system itself could be weaponized. Torture confessions, even when procedurally legal, were notoriously unreliable. People will say almost anything to make severe pain stop, whether or not it's true. So the next time you walk past a museum display of some elaborate spike device labeled medieval torture, remember, the label is often doing more work than the object itself. What other historical myth should I break down next? Let me know in the comments.